Okay, listen up, people. I'm talking to some specific listeners out there. I know there are people listening to this show who work in the television industry, and our sponsor, A&E, wants to remind all eligible Emmy voters to cast your ballots before the deadline on June 20th. And when casting your vote this year, please be sure to consider the second season of Bates Motel for the following categories: Outstanding Drama Series, Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series for Freddie Highmore, who plays the very intense young Norman Bates, an Outstanding Lead Actress in a Drama Series for Vera Farmiga. She earned an Emmy nomination last year playing Norma Bates, and in Season 2, she's incredible. A&E genuinely appreciates your consideration this year. We're also sponsored by Columbia Records, presenting Lazaretto, the new album from Jack White. I talked to Jack White. I made a journey to Third Man Records. I was in that place with the wizard himself. Deep dude, lot of mystique, real rock star, an American original. And he recorded it down there. Lazaretto from Jack White. You can order it now as an Ultra LP featuring exclusive hidden tracks and a first-of-its-kind etched hologram. And you can get the Ultra LP on vinyl. It's available to order now at Amazon.com and available on CD and at all digital retailers on June 10th. All right, now let's get on with the show.
Lock the gate!
Are we doing this? Really? Wait for it. Are we doing this? Wait for it.
Pow!
What the fuck?
WTF.
And it's also, what the fuck?
What's wrong with me?
It's time for WTF.
What the fuck?
With Marc Maron.
All right, let's do this. How are you, what the fuckers? What the fuck buddies? What the fucking ears? What the fuckabillies? How about that? I'm sorry, I'm Marc Maron. This is WTF. Are you with me? Are you with me? On today's show, Chris Cornell from Soundgarden. The fucking pipes of God. Fucking Soundgarden. Yeah, back together again, man. The 20th anniversary edition of Superunknown comes out tomorrow, June 3rd, and Soundgarden's going to be on tour out there with Nine Inch Nails this summer. Are you fucking kidding me? Soundgarden. Cornell in a few minutes. I'm glad you're enjoying the new season of Maron. Thank you for enjoying that. I haven't been doing this because I'm a fucking moron. Give you a little teaser for this week's episode. On Thursday, we're doing the Boomer Lives episode based on the day that I lost Boomer. It's got a lot of great guest stars. The inimitable Rick Shapiro is in that episode. I was thrilled to work with Rick and several other people you'll recognize. It's about the search for Boomer. That's this Thursday, Maron on IFC. 10 p.m. in most places, 9 p.m. in others. I just got back from New Mexico. I did a benefit out there in my hometown, as some of you know. I did a benefit for the Endorphin Power Company, which is sort of a hybrid halfway house idea where they have community outreach, community service, a gym, a kitchen, single occupancy rooms for people who are transitioning into sobriety or out of jail. They got a garden there. They got a performance space there. It's just an amazing facility, and I was happy to raise some money for them, and they're doing good things, helping people out through that tough time, entering the insanity of sobriety from the chaos and dark insanity of drugs, transitioning out of the hooskow, out of the slammer. But, I talked to the dude Jeff over there, and, he gave me a tour of the facilities, told me what he wanted to do, and I was thrilled that we raised some money. We had a good show. Genevieve Mueller and Matt Peterson, some local comics out there who I reached out to, a bunch of Albuquerque comics on Twitter, and they opened the show. They did a great job. And I saw people I haven't seen in 30 years, man. 30 fucking years. It's crazy. I saw some dude that I was at driver's ed with. His name's Tim. And I remember me and Tim were friends when we were in driver's ed, and I went down to his house. He lived in sort of a rural part of New Mexico in my memory. And I watched Tim kill chickens, and it changed my life. An afternoon with Tim Hooten changed my life because I watched his family cut the heads off of chickens. I watched them run around, and I was like, not for me. I know it's the right thing to do. I know it's just food. I know this is as intimate as you can get with your food. This is euthanasia based on appetite. I was not into it, but it was nice to see Tim. Saw my old buddy Dave Kleinfeld, who I've known since second grade. Some of us Jews stick together. We go the long haul, man. And I saw my dad. I spent some time with my dad. Yes, I did. All right, so here's the layout. Here's what happens. I was supposed to go to New Mexico on Thursday morning. On Wednesday, I get a text, oddly, from Jenny Connor, the producer of the show Girls. She goes, well, you're going to do a part. And I'm like, I have not heard about this. And then I heard from the casting agent. And then I heard from my manager. They wanted me to do a scene on the show Girls. I'm not going to tell you the scene. I'm not going to tell you what I played. I can tell you it wasn't me. I can tell you I played a guy. I can tell you I didn't get naked. I can tell you there was no sex involved. That's all I'm going to tell you. But I flew to New York on Thursday, and I got there. I checked into a hotel, the Trump Soho, which I was put up in. And as expected, it was very tacky in a very Trumpian way. But it was nice. I hadn't been to New York in a while. I was a little tired. I was a little jarred. And then I got up Friday morning. I went to the set. I did the thing. We shot all day. I went to eat some food. I texted Louis C.K. because I know he lives down there. He texted me back. He's cutting his episodes. And we didn't get to hang out, so I hang out by myself. I don't mind hanging out by myself in New York City. It's fine because I'm always surrounded by people. Then I got up on Saturday morning at 4:30, got on a plane, flew to New Mexico. Who picks me up? My dad. Now, I want you to know, some of you were concerned that the phone call that I shared with you on my 500th episode with my father was somehow sandbagging and against the newly established order of being respectful of people in my life in terms of what I reveal about them and how I reveal it. My dad signed off on that phone call. We put it together. I sent him the file. He said, that phone call was touching and it was moving to me, and I'd like to include it in the show. Here it is. Have a listen. And about 2 hours later, he goes, yep, I'm okay with it. So that was signed off by him. So when I was going to see my dad, I knew that we had made this plan, and we'd been in a very bad fight. It was the worst that we'd ever been in, probably, and I was pretty dead set on just living a life without him. And since that phone call, I said, well, pick me up. He picked me up. We hugged. There's a little crying going on both parts a little bit, and then it was just back to normal, man. Back to him telling me what I ought to be doing. Oh, well, you know what you ought to do. You know what you got to do. You know what you should do. You know who you should talk to. You know who got in trouble for that. A lot of that. And then, we talked about business. We talked about my brother. And then it always ends up with him going like, I still think it's pretty reasonable, the idea of winning the lottery. That's why I play. I wouldn't play if it wasn't a reasonable thing. And that's, over the arc of a couple of days, that's usually about the time I could go, all right, well, this was a good time, Dad. I'm glad we're back on it. Good luck with the lottery. Good luck with that. So let's talk about, am I jumping in? Am I stuffing emotionally? Am I stuffing? Look, I'm glad we're okay. The most interesting thing about whatever resentment you have against your father is when you get together with your father, you're like, oh my God, I do that. Oh my God, that's where I got that. Holy shit, he thinks that way. I think that way. It's hard not to really look at the possibility that you're hating yourself if you have anger at your father, because they're ingrained in you. So to separate that shit and to say like, all right, these are the parts of him that I have that may not have fared him well or done him any favors. So why not see that as some sort of, chronic illness? The parts of your father that are inside of you that you don't like in him, it's a chronic illness you have to live with and treat it appropriately. If you have a chronic illness that is survivable, you're like, well, if I don't do this and if I don't act on that, and maybe if I don't say that, like he would say, that this illness won't get any worse. So treat the part of you that is directly a copy of your parents emotionally. Treat that part of you, if it's negative, as a survivable chronic illness. And own it. What's the matter with you? You have an illness? Yes, I'm a lot like my father, in a bad way. Oh, well, that's survivable. You just have not to, you just can't act on that stuff. Whatever the negative parts of him that caused him trouble, that. So that's how you treat that illness. You live with it, and you don't behave that way. You just say like, oh, I'm about to be my father. And then you go like, no, I'm not. I'm going to be Mark, and I'm going to harness that fucker, and I'm going to just keep that part of him in a room marked diseased dad thoughts. And I'll try to keep that door closed. But occasionally they get out, and then, that's it. But I love the guy, and he loves me, and it was okay. We're sponsored today by our friends at HostGator. What is HostGator? Well, if you've ever been to WTFpod.com, you know HostGator. We created the site using HostGator, and we've stayed with them ever since. We were satisfied customers long before they became sponsors of WTF. If you have an idea for a business or a blog or a podcast, use HostGator, just like we do. Create your own site in no time for as little as $3.47 per month. And if you're shaky about building a site, HostGator will give you all the help you need. You can use one of HostGator's site builders or use WordPress to create your website. And if you want someone to help you get started, call or chat with HostGator's 24/7 customer support team. A lot of people want to start a website, but just don't feel like they know enough to pull the trigger. Make it happen today with HostGator. Use the offer code WTF when you sign up to get 30% off your hosting. That's HostGator.com, offer code WTF. HostGator.com. HostGator. Got a lot of shows coming up in a few different places. I'm doing some smaller venues. I actually don't know the size of the venue. I'm going to be at Firefly in St. Louis, I believe it's called. I'm going to be in Kansas City in a few weeks. I'm going to Chicago to the 26th annual AV Club Festival. Go to WTFpod.com. Check the calendar. I'm going to be in Bloomington, Indiana. I'm going to be in Charleston, North Carolina. Those are dates that are up now. I think I'm going to be part of the Oddity Festival in a few cities this year. So there's stuff happening. Strap in. I'm going to talk to Chris Cornell. And, again, the 20th anniversary edition of Superunknown comes out tomorrow, June 3rd, and Soundgarden's going to be out there on the road across the country with 9 Inch Nails. That is a powerful night of fucking rock music right there. Okay, let's talk to Chris Cornell. People, I know it's tough deciding where to focus your resources to grow your business, but one thing I can tell you don't need to waste valuable time going to the post office for mailing and shipping. Just use Stamps.com to access all the services of the post office right from your desk whenever you need them. Buy and print official U.S. postage using your own computer and printer. Get postage for any letter or package, any class of mail, all for just a fraction of the cost of an expensive postage meter. With Stamps.com, you'll never have to go to the post office again, so you can spend your time where it matters most, focused on your business. We had to make a lot of decisions when WTF was growing, and somewhere around episode 200, we decided to use Stamps.com. Now that we're more than 500 episodes in, I can't imagine not using it. Use my promo code WTF for this special offer. Start a no-risk trial, plus get a $110 bonus offer that includes a digital scale and up to $55 of free postage. Don't wait, folks. Go to Stamps.com. Before you do anything else, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage and type in WTF. That's Stamps.com. Enter WTF. So you grew up in Seattle?
Uh-huh.
Like the whole life was in Seattle?
Mm-hmm.
So you remember Seattle when it was a sweet, dark place?
I have memories of Seattle. Actually have a lot of memories from Seattle that are legitimately in the 60s, believe it or not.
What was that like? Well, how old are you?
I'll be 50 in a month and a half.
I just turned 50.
Yeah.
Right, so we're like the same age. So you kind of remember like kind of 68, 69-ish?
Yeah, I remember what the world looked like, and it's sort of based on what people wore, what kind of glasses they had,
right,
and what cars were there.
Hair length too.
Yeah, hair length too. That's true. And
yeah.
Everybody kind of looked like CCR, sort
exactly.
of.
Yeah,
and, and I remember there were a lot of British bikes then.
Mm-hmm.
So they were super loud, like way louder than anything.
What,
now.
Triumphs?
Yeah. That was kind of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my neighborhood, I remember at that age, I moved when I was 3.5. So I still have memories up to then that I know are 3.5 or earlier.
Were you compelled? Because when I remember being like from a very young age, looking at the hippies, going like, that's what I need to. That needs to be the direction I need to go.
I think that at some age, I kind of went the other way, and it was based on actually knowing some of those guys and not liking them at all.
Oh, really? When you were a kid?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I had I had a neighbor.
Yeah.
who,
The band
it was a Filipino man who was married, and at some point his wife left, and they had two sons.
Yeah.
And one of the sons was kind of cool, and the other one was younger, and he was like super hippie-ish.
Right.
And he had all his friends kind of coming over, and they would sort of live in the basement kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they looked like Leonard Skinner exactly.
Right.
And I remember a guy, I was walking by the basement, and he opened the window that looks up from the basement, and he was shooting something at me out of a syringe one time.
Really?
Yeah, and I just thought, these guys are creeps.
Yeah.
And they weren't super mean, but they were somehow.
Did they play? Did they have a band?
No, they didn't have a band.
They just look like that.
Yeah, they
Clearly,
just look like Leonard Skinner.
there were syringes involved.
No, these were guys that were in and out of jail all the time and stuff. And yeah, they creeped me out.
But do you remember music being part of? Because I remember sort of the Vietnam War, and I remember Mad Magazine. And I just remember that the hippies like seemed to have the culture by the balls.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if I had much of a perspective of that.
Well, we were like, how old were we? Like 5?
Yeah.
6?
Well, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I do remember like some of those Seattle summers where, there were a lot of girls with huge long hair and wearing halter tops,
right,
and like dancing to 70s music, and all the brothers looked like bikers. And that was also one of the things that defines that period, is it was the end of the baby boom. So,
right,
in the neighborhood I lived in, every house had 5 boys in it. Everyone had several big brothers in various states of like college or jail or military or whatever. And so like I heard Iron Butterfly and Uriah Heep and, every kind of somebody's big brother's records.
You didn't have a big brother?
I had 2.
So you got all that?
Yeah. My big brothers, what got me into prog was my oldest brother, because he took a turn into, kind of like ELP, Yes, sort of anything that seemed a little weird.
Rough turn.
Yeah. And,
but you don't consider your music prog?
No, not really.
But
no.
you were into it?
Yeah, for a couple of years, yeah. I went in.
I don't know why I could never do it.
I think for me it was I smoked pot at a really young age, and then after a couple of years I stopped. And, and I think I think it opened the door to that, just the sort of fantasy world of there's elves and Tolkien's living in there somewhere. And and I loved it. And of course it was the perfect setup for punk rock.
Right.
Because by the time punk rock hit and I heard it and understood it, the timing couldn't have been better, because it was like, thank God, this is awesome.
Yeah, snap me out of it. I'm awake now.
Yeah.
Thank you for waking me from my trance.
This is fantastic.
Who were your other bands when you were a kid?
Well, the Beatles was the band when I was a kid, and it was
forever, right?
I don't know how old, 8 or something. One of my neighbors, he had like 4 older brothers, and the oldest one had been kicked out of the house. And he just left all his records in the basement. Right. And so I stole his Beatles records, and he had everything.
All of them.
Every reissue, every compilation, every album. Yeah. And the first run of every album, and I have all of them. Yeah. But they were wrecked, like all the sleeves were ruined, water damaged. And I just grabbed them on a whim, and I had one of those old student stereos that packs up like a suitcase. Yeah. And I just sat in my bedroom and started listening to them. And by then, they had broken up, and it wasn't... the Beatles had nothing to do with pop culture. Right.
They were just the mythic presence over everything. Yeah. Yeah. The Beatles.
Yeah, you would see, like the Let It Be pictures were in everyone's house. Right. So they were there. It was almost like other family members. This is my mom,
you mean like,
my dad.
The White Album pictures.
Or the White Album
the
pictures.
The 8x10s. Yeah.
And then the cover of Let It Be was 4 photos.
Right. Yeah. And
that would be, that's the big difference between vinyl LPs and anything else, is that these albums, if it was a huge album, it was in everyone's living room and you saw it when you went inside.
Space. Yeah.
Everyone had that Let It Be album in their living room with the Beatles looking at you.
Yeah, so right away you could go like, yeah, Beatles.
So,
which records were the ones where you were like, I gotta hear that again?
Well, I remember really getting into Sgt. Pepper's, of course. I really got into the White Album. I really got into Abbey Road with headphones. And
for that run on side B?
I don't know what it was about it, but it didn't do it for me listening to it on speakers, but I discovered that there's such a thing as headphones that sound good. Maybe that was the beginning of like good sounding headphones.
Yeah.
And I remember cranking it super loud, and I couldn't believe the production of Abbey Road. Like,
well, there's that whole run through, like, you know, You Never Give Me Your Money,
right.
Polythene Pam, and then like that whole, like, they're all connected.
Which
and
is prog, really.
Yeah, it is. But I think it was for them just to, like, well, how are we going to put all this shit together? We got a bunch of fragments.
Yeah, when they came out with that with that album of number ones and then demos, I kind of learned by then, like, oh, that's how those songs came about, because they had all these cool little bits, and then they couldn't make songs out of them.
Right.
Me and Mr. Mustard made just a shitty song.
Right. But part of this weird thing.
Part of the weird thing was awesome.
Yeah.
Because you're sitting there thinking, what were these guys thinking when they did this?
How high were they?
How high do you have to be to come up with Mr. Mustard and Polythene Pam?
I love
really high.
Yeah, really high. I love that lick on Polythene Pam, though. I love that guitar on that thing.
Yeah, it's great.
When did you start? Like, what were your folks doing? Were you a problem?
Kind of, yeah, but not. I didn't get arrested.
What kind of business were they in?
My dad was a pharmacist. And my mom was a housewife that then got into kind of this sort of white trash interior decorator thing, just to get out of the house, to get away from us. Yeah, they
either go travel agent, real estate agent, interior decorator.
Yeah. I was 6 when she found the need to get out, and so I was the youngest boy, and I think by the time I was born and hit that age, I benefited from the fact that my parents were over it, you know? So I could do pretty much whatever I wanted as long as police didn't bring me home. And that's what I did. But music was a big part of it. So I was either outdoorsy or I was sitting in a room alone, because I didn't have friends where we would sit and listen to records and talk about it. Yeah. My friends didn't get it. So I just did it alone, and it became a lonely thing.
What's the age difference between you and your brothers?
One's 3.5 years older, and one's 5 years older.
Oh, so not that much.
Not much, no.
Are they both still around?
Yeah.
They music guys?
Yeah, my brother Peter is, he actually just finished a solo record, I think, that's coming out soon. He's one of the first guys I remember where, and this is a funny story because it's like 12 at night, and my dad, who was a pharmacist, is already in his pajamas in bed trying to sleep, and I'm in the basement, and we lived in an old farmhouse, and my brother shows up at the basement door with some older looking dude, and they bring in like 2 half stacks of a Marshall, and they put a head on it, right? And they plug it in. This is like almost midnight. Yeah. And the first thing the guy does, he's trying to sell it to my brother, and the first thing he does is he goes, check this out. And he turns the reverb all the way up, turns both volumes all the way up, lifts the head off the cabinet, and then lets go. And it crashes down on the cabinet and just goes... And my dad comes down the stairs, and I don't even think his feet were really touching the ground. He was like almost flying with anger and hatred, and his head was like this giant tomato, screaming, and his teeth were kind of green, you know, and he was gnashing his teeth at my brother. And I was looking at my brother thinking, you're out of your goddamn mind. You're lucky he didn't beat the shit out of you. And I was thinking, that's so fucking cool.
Well, what kind of selling? How is that a way to sell an amp? By dropping the head? Was it a tube amp or was it solid?
Well, he dropped it on the cabinet.
Oh, okay. Just a little bit. Not like...
It felt to me like the guy had no idea how to play guitar, and the most he'd come up with what to do with this thing was to make the reverb explode.
He'd probably just stolen it.
Yeah, probably. And then I remember the next day, my brother going to some rehearsal.
Yeah. With the amp, did he buy it?
With the amp, he bought it, I think, or borrowed it, and the cabinets were like on casters, and we live in Seattle, and Seattle has hills. Yeah. So my last image of this whole thing was my brother trying to manage to roll this amp and cabinet down an extremely steep hill in the middle of the street without losing control of it, and then disappearing into the sunset.
When did you start playing yourself? I mean, when did you start, knowing that was the thing? Man?
Well, I learned some chords.
Did you play before you sang?
Yeah,
obviously.
I didn't. I kind of had a sort of nimble choir boy voice as a like prepubescent kid.
Yeah,
and could sing really well. And then when my voice changed, like whatever range I had disappeared completely, and I gave up on singing. I didn't think.
No, you found it again.
Yeah, it took some. Soundgarden really helped me find it. We couldn't come up with a singer, and I was like, "Oh, I'll try."
Really?
Yeah, that's how it happened, really. I was the drummer at first.
It's so effortless, man. I mean, when I saw you at the Forum, I was like, it didn't even, like, you weren't, there was no theatrics to the amazing, that what sounds like should require strain.
Yeah, I think if you're doing it right, then it shouldn't require too much strain.
Well,
if you're going to try to sing a 2-hour set, there's techniques they teach you. All of the straining and the pushing and the stretching doesn't help make that sound. I think it's just your instinct to, like, oh, how do I do this? Well,
it's a breath thing, right?
Yeah.
Once you have it.
Yeah, it's sort of like you just got this little reed in your throat hanging out, and all the muscles in your neck and everything surrounding it don't really help it by trying to strangle it. But that's sort of what I did. But I learned how to sing really in Soundgarden rehearsals because we were really loud, super loud, and in order to get my voice to cut, I just started pushing it really hard.
Well, so how does it start? What's going on? Are you going out to see live shows in high school? I mean, what's going on there? What were some of the shows?
Not much. I mean, I think I probably saw, like, sort of bands at the dance and like skating rink sort of stuff.
But we're the same age, so the touring rock bands were who they were. I mean, I remember. Do you remember when Van Halen's first album came out?
Yeah, I remember.
Like, holy shit!
I remember the first time I heard Eruption, and I didn't understand that it was a guitar.
Right? Yeah, and everybody was playing. It was like everywhere.
Yeah, it was everywhere. I remember a kid walking across the playground with a boombox, but before they were stereo.
Right.
And
like a Panasonic thing.
Yeah, like a Panasonic with it sounded pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
And it had FM on it.
Right. Yeah.
But, and I'm hearing it and thinking, my God, what is that?
It's like changed the world.
Yeah, it did. But it also did another thing, which punk rock cured. It sort of, like, I never thought of myself as being in a rock band or being, I didn't have dreams of being a rock star, ever.
What were your dreams?
I didn't have any.
You just wanted to hang out?
I was just sort of, I was a wild kid.
Yeah.
And
what, just like running around, driving around, smoking weed, drinking?
Climbing trees, swimming, running around in parks.
It's fucking beautiful up there.
Yeah, Seattle's a great place to grow up. At least it was then. And then listening to music.
Right.
And, so I could play, like I learned some chords on acoustic guitar. I learned to read music and play piano when I was like 10, but then I quit because it was like school to me.
Right.
And no one encouraged me to keep it up. I regretted it really soon after that. Of course, I regret it now, but
it's hard to focus. So, man, if you I've been playing a long time, and I'm not even a real musician. I'm just a hobbyist. But there are guys who are nerd out and they'll noodle and they'll figure all that shit out, and then there are guys who just want to get out what they want to get out.
Well, I don't know that. I don't think that I had I probably had the personality to sit in a room and noodle, but probably not the raw talent to pick up a guitar and go, I can do this. I never had that thought of I can do this until I was literally doing it. And drums kind of did that for me.
Well, what were you saying about the way that punk, was the sort of cure of
when you hear, and I'm not putting down Van Halen, I think that they had elements of that same, like, just simple, straightforward rock that was in punk rock as well.
Right.
But Eddie Van Halen's a musical genius.
Right.
And I think there was a period in commercial rock music where it kind of came from Led Zeppelin and that period where commercial rock became, a singer with a 5-octave range and a guitar player that has 2 necks on his guitar and can play both of them somehow kind of at the same time, and his biggest influence isn't another guitar player, it's actually like Bach or something.
Right. That's what they say publicly.
Yeah. And I didn't think Seattle produced people like that. I thought you had to like be born and grow up somewhere else.
England. They only make those in England.
Exactly. Something like you. And I don't know. And you couldn't be blue collar. I didn't understand the blue collar part of rock because I think that confused it too. And so punk rock, it changed everything, for me in that.
Anyone could do it.
I could be in a band. I was in a band within like 3 days of the first time I ever played the drums. I was a drummer in a band. And the funny thing was that at that age, I was probably 16, having had no aspirations to do or be anything. Once that week was up, I knew what I was going to do for the rest of my whole life.
And
it never went back.
It was that good.
It was great. I had there's nothing rock band. I guess that's what I'm doing.
Great.
And by the time I was 24 or 5, that's when a lot of my friends were we'd be hanging out getting drunk, and they would say, I just don't know what I want to do with my life. And it occurred to me then how lucky I was that I never had that moment. I was figuring I'll mow lawns and wash dishes until I'm 100 years old, but this is what I will do.
Did you mow lawns and wash dishes?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, I did all those things. I broke concrete. I cleaned fish guts. I did, and it was all fine.
At Pike's Market or
no?
Elsewhere?
I worked at a place called Ray's Boathouse, which was sort of like a seafood joint on the bay, beautiful.
So you can take apart a fish to this day.
Yeah.
Someone presented you with a fish.
I worked at a couple seafood wholesalers where it was just really more of the cleaning up fish scales and slime. And I ended up, just kind of doing I ended up then after that doing jobs you can do when you're in a band, but you want to go play shows for a couple weeks, and so that would either be like construction, restaurant stuff like that. But I was never unhappy. Because while I was at work, whether it was a cook or washing dishes or something, I was thinking about my band and music and arranging songs. And
well, what was the band you were drumming in? What were they playing? What were they called?
The first band was called the Jones Street Band because my house was on Jones Street, and my oldest brother had turned our garage into this soundproof, windowless rock environment.
Rock environment.
Yeah, he didn't. Right. He had a stereo that was absurd.
Right.
That was like 300-watt thing that was so loud that the neighbors would complain when I was listening to records, but they wouldn't complain when the band was playing because the stereo was louder.
It was louder.
Yeah. So he moved out, and I inherited his pad,
his rock environment,
Greg Brady kind of pad, and within a month of having it is when I bought a drum set, and
your parents must have been fairly supportive.
My parents were divorced at that time. My mom, I think my mom was thrilled that I was doing something that didn't include alcohol or drugs or yeah, exactly.
She had no foresight apparently.
None, because being in a band is where the heavy drinking really started.
Yeah, I bet.
But that we did that, and
the Jones Street Band.
The Jones Street Band.
You're playing drums.
I'm playing drums.
Who's playing guitar?
There were 2 kids in the neighborhood. One was 15, one was 17, and one was like student of Hendrix,
right,
15-year-old, and one was student of Jimmy Page, the 17-year-old. And to this day, and unless my memory's not serving me right, those guys were awesome.
Right.
They were fantastic.
Hey, in that moment, they were probably amazing.
They were really, they were playing like the Zeppelin guy he could play the solos from Dazed and Confused, like different bootleg live versions note for note, and you could listen and A/B them. He was doing it.
Yeah.
In earnest.
So those are real nerds.
He was good.
Yeah.
And, they were both good. But really quickly, it's like 1977, 78. I was getting into other stuff. I was getting into punk music. I was getting into this other stuff. And none of those kids really seemed to be into it.
They were holding on to the old paradigm.
The one guy that I started the band with was into it. And he was one of the first guys that he played me a song from the Farts, which was a Seattle band that had Duff McKagan was in it, and some other Seattle notables. And I think the song was 18 seconds long or something.
Yeah.
And it had the most energy I'd ever heard in something that you might dare call music. And we would listen to it over and over and over. And so I shifted gears, and then I was in like several, 7 bands over the next couple of years.
Well, Hendrix, like the whole idea of Hendrix hangs pretty heavy over Seattle. Right, because that's where he came from.
Yeah, there were a lot of Hendrixy guitar players, and there were a lot of bands where they just did Hendrix songs. And there was it Randy Hansen, who he made a living out of being sort of a Hendrix tribute guy.
What? So were you guys doing covers like with the first band?
Yeah, anything we could think of.
Now, when you broke into punk after you heard the Fart song, and the sky opened for you.
Yeah, and I think it quickly went into kind of a post-punk indie world I was a fan of punk for about 5 minutes, and then I discovered that punk isn't just like fast bar chords and spitting.
Right.
There's more going on musically and artistically, really.
Who were the guys that showed you that? Where'd that kind of come into it?
Friends that lived sort of near colleges.
Yeah, right. But do you remember the bands?
Friends that lived. I'm trying to think. There was a band called Wire. That was I think that was Wire or Killing Joke were the first couple bands where I understood that their punk could also include
musicality,
other stuff. Because Wire, I would hear Pink Floyd in it,
right?
And I was a huge Pink Floyd kid.
Yeah,
music was escapism to me, so
right.
I thought that made sense. And so it didn't have to just be political, social commentary with blistering power chords. It could be trippy, and there could be social commentary, but it's more esoteric.
Right.
And Killing Joke was like this. Is he Robert Smith singing in a heavy metal band? What is this? I didn't get it, but I got that I liked it.
Hard to place them.
Yeah. And those two bands really, I think, were instrumental in me understanding that there was some sort of future that music was going to have, and no one was going to know what it was.
So after you learned that stuff, where are you at? Did you still living at home?
No, I moved out pretty young, so I was working in restaurants and just had roommates.
And you were playing drums.
I was playing drums, and I had roommates that had cool records. And
are they musicians?
No, not really.
Not
no, they're guys that drunken jams.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
you're all sitting around smelling like fish.
Yeah.
Drinking beers.
But these are guys who were there. These are people I knew who were around me when I got my first drum set, and I wasn't a musician either. So there was there's something they must have observed I wasn't paying attention to. But still, those are your friends that they're a part of who you become as a musician on a lot of levels.
Absolutely.
Coming home with the first REM EP and going, "What is this? Why is this good? I don't know, but it is, right? Yeah, it is." You
got to get consensus. Are we on the same page here?
Yes.
I don't want to be a dick.
And it's like, no, I think it's good. I really do. And
you can't trust your own instincts. Like you don't even want to say I love this. You're just sort of like, what? Okay.
Even though I did love it,
right?
Like I wore that thing out, and so I bounced around in different bands. But I had a roommate that had like a nervous breakdown, and that's really the beginning of Soundgarden, because I had met Kim and Hero both from Soundgarden while we were sort of messing around in this other one of the many horrible bands that I was in.
Which one was that?
It was called the Shemps.
Yeah,
the Shemps. It was awful. Yeah, and the guy it was his band. He knew both of them. And Kim and Hero, and I met him somehow. So I was introduced to those guys, and I called Hero one day because I owed him money, and his roommate got mad at him and was leaving. Right. And he said, "You know anyone who needs a roommate?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. I need to move in somewhere now." And I moved in like the next day. And turns out he was a bass player, and I was a drummer, and so we decided we would start a band, and then we waited. We couldn't find anyone that we wanted to play with.
Who's that guy?
Hiro Yamamoto.
Right.
So we couldn't find anyone until one day he said, maybe Kim should come over and see what happens. And that was this revelation when Kim walked in. The three of us, we wrote like 7 songs in 2 days, kind of thing.
And Kim was playing guitar then?
Kim was playing guitar, and it was unlike anything I'd ever heard. I'd never heard anyone play guitar like that.
I still haven't. Really.
And it was natural, it wasn't, it didn't seem like this guy, because I ran into a lot of burnout guys that were desperately trying to invent something that was unique. And we sort of wanted to invent our own band, but we didn't seem to have to like try to sort of intellectually do it. It just happened. It's like, wow, this is different. And then you're excited about it, and then that makes you kind of trust what you're doing and steer into more different and feel like, well, any way that I want to express this is valid.
So Kim always had that thing. Like he had a way of playing that was organic to him no matter what.
Yeah, and
it's a rare thing.
And it meant something to me, if he plays some guitar thing that he showed me back then in 1984 that I haven't heard since then, it gives me that same feeling like if I hear an old Beatles song. It triggered something in me that I didn't ever hear before, and I connected with on some emotional level, I guess. I don't know.
So you guys were fast friends.
Yeah, right away. We wrote an incredible amount of songs.
Any of those songs end up on the first Soundgarden records?
No.
Did you play them?
Yeah. Like, we seemed to click in a way, sort of alone in a room, that translated to, our first live show ever seamlessly. Like the first live show, we had to talk somebody into giving it to us, and we went in. We were a 3-piece, and I sang most of the songs from the drums, and it just went over. And there was.
And you were called Soundgarden.
Yeah, and there were, I don't know, 40 people maybe.
Who came up with that name?
Kim.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. I just realized it for some reason. It always represented something a little harder to me, but it's sort of a sweet name.
Well, it served us really well because I think that having that name was part of us becoming kind of a big draw in Seattle, especially. And even when we first started doing tours, anytime we were opening up for a band, and what would happen is we would open up for a band that was kind of heavy and sort of
like who?
Like, I don't know. I mean, I can't remember like what a good example of that
local guys.
But like, say we played a show with Chri one time.
Great.
And so, if you didn't know who Soundgarden was, and you would see it, you would think we were some sort of green on red kind of like a neo psychedelic alternative REM-y thing, right?
Right.
And then you would show up, and we would open, and we would come out and be Soundgarden, and then they would go, "Holy fuck." And so people would love us because of that. I think the guys in the Screaming Trees had that experience with us. They actually came to our show to laugh at us, and then we came out
because of the name
Soundgarden, I guess.
They thought, who are these hippies?
Yeah, but I got that a lot. It's like, wow, I thought you guys were going to be this psychedelic thing, and then they would like us sort of more than they otherwise would have because they would have been pleasantly surprised, and. It ended up being a really good thing.
So you were a 3-piece, and so you opened for bands like Chri, and they're monsters, man. They're like balls to the wall.
Yeah, and I think they were my favorite band at the time, and we were a 3-piece, and they were a 3-piece kind of thing.
Okay, so who else is around? I mean, because now we're coming on to something I'm sure you've talked about a lot. I mean, some scene is developing there, correct?
Well, I think the closest contemporary at that time was then Green River. I was at their first show, and it was Steve Turner and Marc Maron from Mudhoney and Jeff Ament
from Pearl Jam.
From Pearl Jam, and then
that's a good band. I had that record. I don't have it anymore. I like that record though.
And then and then Stone Gossard ended up joining that band as well, and it kind of had different. It had different incarnations.
Now, were you guys mostly friends? Because I watched that.
Yeah, we were. It was a very small scene. That sort of urban punk scene was very small. Like the audience was always the other bands, really.
And you would still call it punk?
No, I'm not sure what we called it.
Because it's weird how whatever the idea of grunge or whatever, it always seemed to me to be pretty much rock.
Yeah, but it didn't. But it definitely came from a U.S. indie scene,
right?
And to define what that was at the time was Husker Du, Bad Brains, Sonic Youth, the Meat Puppets, Butthole Surfers, and just take those examples and put them together. None of them sounded anything like each other, and everybody seemed to have completely their own trip. But it had roots in
arena rock,
punk,
right?
And in what then was starting to be called alternative, simply because it was an alternative to commercial rock. Mm-hmm. And when that word first came up, it was still a word that had a definition that is in the dictionary, and then it became a genre where it wasn't. It used to just include anything as long as it wasn't commercial rock. And so, you could have a sax player in your band, like the Seattle band Feast. They had two singers, and one was a boy, one was a girl. And when the girl sang, the boy played this sort of free jazz sax over it. And it wasn't like anything.
Well, that was that time, also because out of punk, you also got that whole world of art rock that was cool.
Yeah.
This
is what that kind of was.
Right.
Pere Ubu was like one of our sort of god bands that we would pray to, and Sonic Youth, and that kind of.
There was room for it.
There was room for it, and it seemed like this open chapter of a book where it could go on and on and on, and you can do anything you want, and there are no boundaries, and Soundgarden benefited from that thinking. And probably what defined us then and what made people talk about us was that we weren't sort of including anything we wanted, and some of that was not okay at the time.
Like what?
And it was not okay.
Is it on the records?
It was not okay to the fans of indie music, for example, then. And that was kind of a unapologetic maleness.
Yeah.
That was incorporating sort of heavy riff rock that reminded people of bands that were at the time considered to be, you know, completely uncool.
Right. Uncool.
Not so much sell out commercial, but like if you, for example, if someone said, somehow that last song you guys played reminded me a little bit of Led Zeppelin. For most bands...
That was a bad thing?
For most bands, that was the kiss of death. But for Soundgarden, it seemed... People kind of started to look at it differently, like... And that was the first time I heard like this phrase of Zeppelin in a good way. Yeah. Because there was, at that moment, nowadays, Zeppelin is always in a good way. But in those days, there was a whole lot of Zeppelin in a bad way. Because you had bands like
Doesn't that seem crazy?
Yeah, it kind of does. Although, if you think about it, what was taken from Zeppelin by all the commercial rock bands was the hair, the like super tight pants,
the fashion,
kimonos, light show. It's in an arena, drum solos going on, stuff like that. They didn't take the sheer rawness of. I mean, every Led Zeppelin song to me on record, especially the earlier records, sounded like they had written it right while they were playing it. Almost like Jimmy Page didn't seem to care. Like, he would do these blistering solos where he would miss, like, 5 or 6 notes, would sort of fret out, and his fingers would miss him. He didn't give a shit.
But also, like, it seemed to me at that time, because we're the same age, you watched all those bands sort of arc out. Like, you know, the best of those bands was what you're talking about now. And by In Through the Outdoor, which is still a good record.
So, I still love it.
Yeah, but it was a huge commercial success, and people had lost touch with what made those bands so fucking good to begin with.
Right, and where, you know, you're either rejecting them. I mean, I think by the time Song Remains the Same came out, punk music was already blowing up in London and in New York.
And it was
in earnest.
And it had to be a reaction against everything.
Right. And so fast forward to like 1985, 86, we're sort of allowing some of that into our music, and it's getting a violent reaction.
One way or the other.
Well, there were a lot of supporters, and I think that's where we found kind of a new, not only our own voice, but we were doing something pretty much nobody was doing.
Well, you must have been surrounded by, you know, arty, sort of like, you know, nerdy kids.
Yeah. There was a poet guy who seemed to weigh, you know, less than 100 pounds.
Right.
You know, and there was, there were college DJs that were supporters.
Yeah.
A lot of guys in other bands. There were writers. It was basically college people.
But I imagine at some point you just started seeing dudes you like to rock show up.
Not for a while.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Really?
That happened later. I think you're pretty much in the 90s before that happened.
Really?
Yeah.
Because, like, and even now, like, even when people compare you guys to Sabbath or compare Kim to, you know, to that type of heavy riff laying, I mean, at that time, Sabbath was no one gave a shit about Sabbath either.
No, but I think what it is that the guys still listening to Zeppelin and Sabbath records would have no way of knowing a band like Soundgarden existed at the time.
Right,
because they didn't go to indie record stores or listen to college radio or buy indie records. They still were in their cave. And it wasn't until Alice in Chains came on the scene, and they were actually the first band to
break.
Yeah, in a sense, because they didn't have an indie career. They didn't have an indie background. They were kind of a suburban metal band that then was suddenly sort of influenced by all the bands around them in Seattle, and their first record deal was a major label record. But they had all these new elements that they were kind of pulling into what they did, and they were the first band to sell, they had a gold record, you know.
And they were local guys.
And they were local
And you guys knew them?
By then, yeah. They weren't part of the early scene, but by the time their first record came out, we all knew them, yeah.
So,
we were friends.
So what was, the early scene was like the guys from Pearl Jam, the guys from Mudhoney, the guys from...
Melvins we played with.
But like in town.
In town.
Were the Vaselines up there?
Yeah, but I don't remember even seeing them, but they were there. What sort of predated that scene, the huge bands were the Blackouts, which most of them became part of Ministry at some point.
Yeah.
And there's a band called the U-Men, and that was sort of the scene that we walked into.
Right.
We were playing shows at the same time as them, but then what we did was, what Green River did seemed to kind of create a maelstrom of new bands that started to include like people from like guys from Alice in Chains, like they could see that and go, we can make records like this. We can fit into this in a way. There's something new for us too.
Did you feel like they were riding your scene? Was there those kind of weird competitive moments of like, what are these guys doing?
Not really. I don't really feel. I felt like if there was a band that was outwardly the most influenced by us, it was them for sure.
Yeah.
But I also felt like. I always felt like there was nobody like Soundgarden because there really wasn't.
Right.
You know? And if you listen to our albums and compare them to any other band, there was nothing like that. And I still think it's the same way. I still see, like we play festival shows. We've done like 3 or 4 with Arcade Fire, and we can also go play right before Black Sabbath, and either one's fine.
Well, you've defined your thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you guys are a thing. You're not an opening band or you're a band.
Well, I mean, stylistically, our music can fit with either or. And I think that's unusual.
So what was the sort of moment where? I mean, I watched Cameron Crowe's documentary, and he seems to kind of put a lot of the center of the scene on Mother Love Bone and Andrew Wood, and as being this defining moment of the transition of that scene into the mainstream. Do you see that?
I think Soundgarden's first show where like guys from A&R guys from major labels came, that was the defining moment.
That was it.
Yeah, because
were you guys the first guys with a deal outside?
We were the first guys that had any interest from like a commercial label ever, by a lot, well before Love Bone or Alice in Chains. I don't even think Alice in Chains was a band then. And what happened was, through just a couple of circumstances, there was a woman that was the program director at the college radio station. She made a compilation tape with Seattle bands on it. We were one of them. One song.
Which song?
I think it was called Nothing to Say, that ended up on the first Sub Pop record. Mm-hmm. And then Mike Borden from Faith No More, the drummer, was a huge fan of Soundgarden. I guess we played a show with him.
Yeah.
And he got the woman that signed Faith No More to / Warner, he got her interested. So A&M Records, based on this tape from the radio station, and / Warner, which then became became an A&R person for Geffen. They came to one show, which was at this kind of cross-dressers sort of goth bar that had shows, and there were very few places to play, and that was one of the good ones. And we knew that these A&R people were coming, and it just had never happened, and it wasn't something that anyone thought about.
Right.
And they showed up, and I don't remember who opened, but we just blew it up.
Yeah.
We did it. It was the right moment. Somehow, whatever was supposed to happen happened. Yeah. And then we were like in a major label bidding war the next day, and we basically said no to everyone. And we didn't. I think it was 2 years from that day that we ever even signed a deal, because we felt like we're an indie band that knows who our audience is. They know who we are. You guys are going to destroy us. It'll be the end of us.
So this was the enemy.
Yeah, kind of. But the enemy looked around while they were there. They saw us, and I don't remember who it was that opened for us. It might have been Feast or something. And they realized there's something there.
Right. Something happening.
Right away, once the news was that there's this Seattle band called Soundgarden that's in a bidding war, A&R people kind of, just like flies, just jumped on Seattle. And Love Bone was a band that was kind of like a fun band that came out of Green River, where it was just friends doing something that they thought was kind of fun, and then they just decided, we're going to do this. And I think they were the second band after Soundgarden to get that kind of love. And they had great songs. They were the band. I think that Mother Love Bone was the band that could have actually saved commercial rock in the form that we had known it up to then.
Right.
Because they were the only band that was a bridge between what was happening in commercial rock what commercial rock became, really. Because they had elements of all of it, and it all made sense, and in the context of really great songs that you would remember and that would get played on the radio. And the fact that Andy died, I think, was actually kind of the nail in the coffin in my mind, because I know that they would have been a huge band, and I know that somehow that what they did would have allowed some of these other bands to kind of transform a little bit and continue to have a life. But because that didn't happen, it didn't work out that way. It was suddenly, anything that was commercial rock was easily recognizable and immediately the enemy.
But they had the bridge with Andrew.
They had a bridge with Andrew, and the way that they presented themselves, the way that the way that they could incorporate influences from a band like Aerosmith, even a ballad version of Aerosmith,
right?
But still have all of this indie pedigree and all of these other influences. They seem to me in earnest to be able to marry those two sides without it being weird.
And you were tight with Andrew.
Yeah, we were roommates for a while.
And when he died, were you roommates?
No, we hadn't been for a year, I think.
What role, because I know, my first wife, or my second wife, was from Seattle. Now, where did all this fucking heroin come from? Because it just seemed to, just consume that city, man.
Yeah, but, based on what, really? And I can say this, from experiences like post-alcohol addiction and drug addiction where I'm trying to be sober. Yeah. And, say I will go to an AA meeting.
Right.
I'm the only musician there. And if there's another musician, it's like one other guy who's maybe 10 years younger.
No, I know. Yeah, it happens to anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was my thought and feeling of it was that it's not like the whole music scene was addicted to heroin. It was like, a couple guys.
No, I just mean the city. There are certain heroin cities.
Maybe Seattle was one.
Yeah.
I didn't really get that feeling.
Yeah.
I got the feeling that there was a group, of
guys.
Dudes. There were the heroin guys.
Yeah.
And
Team Heroin.
And that somehow, Coke wasn't popular anymore, and heroin sort of was, and that was just. And also, untimely death is one way of sort of creating that feeling,
right?
And there were a lot of dudes in that scene that were into that, but I didn't feel like I felt like it was less than San Francisco or New York.
Right, it's different. I think it was different dope. I don't know. I'm sober almost 15 years, and I remember there was definitely this cutoff between the booze and coke guys, and the weed guys, and the heroin guys were all right, they're at graduate level.
Yeah, and I didn't know any of the heroin or coke. If I knew them, we didn't hang out. I hang out with the guys that we were active guys that drank beer, so we would ride mountain bikes at night, and we would put a 40-ouncer where the water bottle's supposed to go on the bike, and that was the extent of it, really.
Sure, heroin was not an out-in-the-world drug.
No, it wasn't to have fun and climb trees at 4 a.m. and swim across the bay.
Yeah, no, coke was a panic drug. Heroin was a I'm just going to hang out drug. Yeah. Alcohol, you could get shit done on alcohol.
Yeah, you could still somewhat. We had a normal life for at least through our 20s. We were still doing everything we did in our teens.
Right. So, that's what being a musician entitles you to. All right. So you turn your back on A&M initially, and you record what? How many records?
We did. We put out an EP on Sub Pop, a couple EPs on Sub Pop.
I remember those.
And then, and then, kind of our dream comes true, really. And this sort of was oddly timed because right after we released. Our first EP was the second Sub Pop release ever. And Sub Pop essentially came together because of Kim's relationship with the two partners telling them they should work together to start a label. And when it's time to do another thing, SST had called Bruce Pavitt at Sub Pop and was interested in Soundgarden, and Sub Pop didn't have money to give us to make another record at that moment. Yeah. And so Bruce actually said, you should go make a record with SST. And to me, that was our dream come true Valhalla moment, because that was the label we wanted to make records on the whole time. And there was this period where we were Soundgarden. We had probably 2 albums with the material, and we were thinking, no indie is going to ever.
But that's the real indie label, like the Minutemen, Dinosaur Jr.
Yeah.
Who else is on there?
The Meat Puppets.
Yeah.
They did at least one record with everyone. So
Right.
I think Husker Du might have done a record on SST. They did do records on SST.
Yeah.
Sonic Youth did at least one. Bad Brains.
So now you're being coronated.
Yes, this is where we want it to be, and so we had this opportunity, and by then we made that album. By then, that was really pissing off A&M and Geffen and stuff, because they're still talking to us and trying to convince us to sign.
Like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys?
And those record deals, like, I can tell you now, the Sub Pop record deal was one piece of paper. One piece. The SST record contract was maybe 3.
Right.
And I think we hired a lawyer to look at that one, and he seemed more confused by it than us, so we didn't even, we met with him in my living room for 10 minutes, and then that was it.
Yeah.
And those both turned out to be good deals for us.
Right.
And they were for one record. Now you have these guys coming to your shows and talking to you about 5 records with an option for 2 more, and I'm thinking how long it takes to make a record, so I'm thinking, so when I'm 30-something, maybe we'll have fulfilled the contract.
Right.
And then someone will tell you, well, maybe it depends on if they pick up the option, then you've got another 4 releases, and they're talking about, you're essentially making a contractual obligation to accept a record budget for a record that you're going to make 8 years from the time that you sign the deal, which makes no sense monetarily based on any monetary system that's ever existed.
Right. They just own you. That's all it is.
Yeah. And so they're talking to us like that, and we're feeling like, why?
Yeah.
And so once we started making the SST record, the songs that these labels wanted to sign us for, based on these songs, essentially, they start feeling, well, now they're using up all their songs on these stupid, frivolous indie records. That was the way they spoke about it.
Right.
And that was the moment where we just had to have this sense of, we had to have a sense of ourselves and self-confidence and be like, you know what, we just got started.
Yeah. We're
going to write more songs. And what followed that, I think, was some demoing for A&M where they just weren't, they said, we'll pay for you guys to go in the studio and just record some new stuff and let us hear it. And I don't know how many songs we recorded, but we did like a rough mix of a couple and sent it to the A&R guy, who 10 minutes after he listened to it had like tripled the offers of whatever it was they were going to give us. And so at some point we thought we're going to have to transition because we want to reach as many people as we can, and there clearly is a limit to what indie labels can do. And we still had that concern about a major label connecting to our fans that already existed. And to this day, the SST album has outsold the first A&M album.
Louder Than Love?
Yes, because
Really?
they helped us kind of find a new audience that was a commercial rock audience ready for something new.
Right.
But we lost some of the indie audience because they literally would only buy from mom and pop stores that wouldn't carry an album from A&M and wouldn't carry the magazine that A&M advertises in, and wouldn't watch a video program that might play your video, and none of that stuff. So we were right to wait, and we probably could have waited a little longer. But what that did was, what Louder Than Love did on A&M was, it started to chip away at what commercial rock was. The song Get on the Snake, which isn't even in 4/4, and doesn't have a chorus, was the first song I heard being played on commercial rock radio in L.A. at drive time.
Yeah. And
I'm in a car. And up until then, it didn't make sense to me. But then I heard it on the radio in between Tom Petty and something else.
Yeah.
And I thought, this works. This actually, it sounds like it should be coming out of the speakers between these songs.
That's a big moment.
That was a huge moment.
Yeah.
And it didn't lead to a hit record, but it did lead to MTV, radio, anything that was sort of the gatekeepers of commercial rock were changing their perspective. They were coming to us. We weren't going to them.
Is Loud Love on Louder Than Love?
Yes.
That's a great song.
Thank you.
I love that one. So that changed the whole paradigm. That was
started,
the beginning.
Yes, that changed and it wasn't, it was very quick. And the other bands doing that right then were the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Jane's Addiction, really.
And Nirvana wasn't there yet.
No, they weren't around yet.
So this all leads up to Superunknown, which is huge. But what? Bad Motorfinger went platinum, right?
Bad Motorfinger went platinum. I think it actually went double platinum.
Double platinum. Louder Than Love did not.
Louder Than Love did not. Louder Than Love was magic because the buzz on our band and the album and what was happening was so much bigger than what we had sold. I remember when we got offers to open up for Guns N' Roses in the U.S. and Europe. We were all kind of scratching our heads, and I think it was our lawyer at the time that said, well, what's happening is that everyone thinks your record sold a lot more than it did because everyone's talking about it, and they don't know. So just pretend that it sold as much and go do it. And, it's one of those weird things. But that led to Bad Motorfinger, which then, by any standards, double platinum is a huge success. But during that year that it became, that it sold 2 million records, I think Pearl Jam probably sold 16 and Nirvana sold 15 or something. Right. So, which was a mixed blessing. And on the one side you could go, how come it's not us? On the other side, we didn't have a backlash and no one was mad at us.
Right.
So we were still okay.
Get some cred.
Yeah.
All right. So then you do Superunknown, which is like huge. Quadruple?
I think we did 5 million in the U.S. and 3 million outside.
That's like such a huge record.
Yeah,
that
is mammoth.
It's a great fucking record. And I've been buying your records and I was listening to your records. And then when I heard you guys were breaking up, I was one of those people. I'm like, why? What? How does that happen?
Well, and that's the thing. And that's what's. Maybe it's the timing, I don't know, in terms of what was magic about Superunknown is that we had been a band since 1984. Now it's 1994, but people only just heard of us last year. People in terms of the big picture of outside of this little indie world. Right. It's like we're a new thing. It's the new thing. Have you heard that new band? Yeah. No, they're coming out with a new record. And for us, it was like, we were reinventing ourselves as songwriters, in the studio, everything about it. We were
you're growing different ways.
Yeah, and just in a natural way. We didn't wake up one morning and go, "Oh my God, we've got to do something different here." It was the opposite. It was time. We were pushing the boundaries of what we did, and that album came out, at that time that we were reinventing ourselves, people were just discovering us, and that, for some reason, that seemed to work commercially, which is still, to me, a strange thing. The idea that Black Hole Sun, for example, could be this international hit single, have you ever read the words to it? Yeah. It's amazing to me that it's not anthemic. It's extremely dark. It's very esoteric. It's stream of consciousness lyrics that I don't know what they mean. Yeah. I don't know what Paul Anka thinks it means, but he sings the shit out of it. Yeah. And
I've heard that. I got that album. Yeah. It's a weird album.
And so, I don't know. But it worked and it felt right. And I think, we really killed ourselves to make that album and to get to a new place as a band that could live on. But touring for that album also brought us into a point of crisis that I saw Nirvana go through and I saw Pearl Jam go through it. And that is that we came from this post-punk indie world with the punk rock Bible firmly in hand, and we killed commercial rock music by then. It's gone, done. Sunset Strip they're wearing flannel shirts and have pink hair. It's over, and we did it. But at the same time, now we're playing hockey arenas, and we're in the same magazines that scene that we killed was in, and suddenly we're having this existential crisis of we are that. And I think Soundgarden's way of dealing, we internalized it, and I think it was part of an implosion. Now, when we made Down on the Upside that followed it, it's one of our best creative moments, and we produced it and mixed it, and it was great. But we'd been a band for a really long time by then, and we were, Superunknown was just this strange shift in finding an audience and also kind of a band a decade old going through this reinvention.
But did you guys fight?
No.
It just was the natural progression of things. You needed to do some other shit.
Well,
when did you get
one
sober?
thing about being an indie band is that you're in a van driving yourself. You don't have roadies, and you're basically scouring the earth. You're playing everywhere.
Yeah.
If there any little town that has a place that you can play, you do it.
Yeah.
And so by being a band for 10 years, and then suddenly, you're having this great commercial success, that's usually when a band goes out and does what Metallica was doing the whole time, which is you support a big record like Superunknown for 2 years.
Right.
We weren't having it.
Yeah.
We were tired. We were done. We didn't want to go scour the earth on tour, so we didn't.
Even if you were on a jet.
No, we didn't care. We didn't have it in us.
Was that when were you worn out? Is that when you got sober?
No, I didn't. I hadn't even really got going yet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that there was a period in Superunknown where that kind of started to pick up steam, in terms of drinking. But it wasn't until after Soundgarden broke up that I think had a meltdown.
Yeah. What'd that look like?
Not good. And I don't know how long, a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just drink yourself into like just complete fucking insanity or just sadness?
That's a great way to describe it.
Yeah.
I don't think you know that it's insanity at the time, but the biggest lesson I learned from that, and which leads to my biggest warning always, is that you live in your brain. So if you're mixing chemicals and you're constantly under the influence of that, reality is going to look the way it is, and that will be what reality is.
Sure.
But it's valid for that situation. You change the situation, at some point the reality will change, your outlook will change, your perspective will change, your ability to deal with
it's an inside job, as they say.
Exactly. And and I don't know, I think that some people have that in them. And, for me, I think it was always there. I was the responsible guy. I was the guy that always had a job, never needed money, worked really hard, never got fired, I always made sure that the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted.
Sure.
Even as a rock musician, I was pretty reliable. And
control freakish?
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
But learning how to deal with that.
Right.
I think for me, whatever it was, that ability to go so far out with alcohol, it was just a situation that was kind of waiting for me.
Right. You need to break it all apart.
Yeah. When I reached a point where I was like super emotionally vulnerable, I dealt with it in the way that people like me deal with it. I retreated from the reality of it instead of being a responsible guy and trying to figure my life out and make hard decisions and deal with it.
And you were still writing music. I mean, some of the solo
absolutely. I never stopped. Yeah.
But the solo records must have been part of that dialogue.
Yeah, and I think that the difference between drinking, not drinking would have just been I would have made 2 instead of 1 in the year and a half that I did.
Right.
It just slowed me down.
Right.
I wasn't someone that wrote. I couldn't write anything drunk, so I would have to wait till I wasn't, and then write. And then when I felt like I had something good, I'd be relieved and celebrate by getting hammered.
Right.
Kind of.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of laying in wait and waiting for me to be weak, and then I dealt with it in the way a person that's acting weak does, and then until I was fed up with it.
And now you're okay?
Now I'm fine.
You seem good.
Good.
So, you did all that. You did this stuff with Audioswave. You did the solo records, and now this. We're talking because it's the 20th anniversary of Superunknown.
Yes.
And I'm anticipating my vinyl. Thank you. And you're going to tour with the guys.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we start touring soon. We're actually going to Europe. First, we're doing an event in New York where we play Superunknown from top to bottom again.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then we're going to go do a bunch of shows with Sabbath in Europe.
God.
And this is Sabbath's kind of big moment right now, and we get to be a part of it, so it's great.
That's it seems like perfect.
Yeah, it's great.
How's Kim feel about that?
Everyone's psyched about it, really. And we've played shows with them before, and like if you sit and talk to them, it's not suddenly you see there's a lot of parallels between the two bands in ways that you never would have thought.
Right.
And suddenly, now that we're the age we are, the age gap, it shrinks.
Yeah.
When you're 20 and someone's 30,
yeah,
you're on two different planets.
Right.
But when you're 50 and someone's 60, you're the same.
Sure, and you've been through it.
Exactly.
And you know, those guys...
And it doesn't... The opinions about generations and music don't mean anything anymore. It's
and also, like, you know, you're survivors. You're all survivors.
Yeah, exactly.
And the band's getting along good?
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It's amazing, man.
You're talking about Sabbath, right?
but I'd heard stories that you and Kim were not well, and for a period, but you're good?
That's actually not... That was never true.
Oh, good.
None of it.
Did you hear that? Or am I making that up?
I've seen it written.
Okay.
No. I've seen it written, and basically what the stuff that I've seen written was something that could have come out of like the text sort of written about any rock band.
Right.
And that always happened with Soundgarden. You know, we were this band where Matt might be the guy that writes the heaviest song on the record, and he's the drummer.
Yeah.
And Ben from the moment that he joined the band was contributing, you know, almost more music than anybody else for a minute. And so you've got this band where everyone in it is multi-instrumental, everyone in it contributes music, and yet the way that we would be sort of written about often was like the classic rock kind of Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, Pete Townsend, Roger Daltrey sort of. The guitar player is the musical genius, and the singer comes up with words and
so
wears tight pants, and they hate each other. And that was stuff that I saw written, and it had absolutely nothing to do with, not even similar to our inner band dynamic or how we functioned as Soundgarden or how we created what we did. None of it.
Interesting. So they just needed to understand why this band went through this. So they're just like, let's just use the old model. It must be because those two guys.
Yeah, and say it confidently in a way that people read it and go, yeah. Well, I bet you that's it. But no, we had a meeting, I think 2 weeks after we split up, where we were just discussing like different business stuff we had to deal with, given that we were going to be defunct.
Right.
And I remember everyone seeming relieved and in a good mood, and we got along great, and I remember thinking, well, that's great, this must be the right thing. And when we got back together, and, you know, for the first time, I think it was late 2009, where we're talking about doing stuff, there was 5 minutes where it was weird.
Yeah.
Only because we hadn't all been in the same room together. Not because and I think maybe when, you know, you're not with each other, everyone has this defense mechanism that builds a sort of paranoid view of how everyone else must be thinking.
Right.
And after that 5 minutes, we realized that didn't exist, and we've been great ever since. You know, there hasn't been one moment that isn't positive since we got back together then, and that's already now going on 4 years. So
that's awesome, man. It's great to hear, Chris. Thanks for talking to me.
All right, thank you.
That's it. That's our show. Remember, a reminder, Maron on IFC. This is, I believe, the 5th episode of the season out of 13. It's focused on me losing Boomer, and it's a beautiful episode. And that's this Thursday, 10 o'clock. East and West, 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock some other places in the middle. What else do I got to tell you? Go to WTFpod.com for all your WTF pod needs. Get the app if you want to stream the 451 episodes that you've never heard because you're new. Go get the free app, upgrade to premium, and you can have at them all. That's what I tell you. And don't forget to pick up a copy of Jack White's new album, Lazaretto. You can order it now as an Ultra LP featuring exclusive hidden tracks and a first-of-its-kind etched hologram. It's available to order now at Amazon.com, and on June 10th you can get it on CD and at all digital retailers. Yeah, do that. Boomer lives!